What up? It's your boy T-Bear here in reaction to Today's Music Monday. So last week we delved into the native tongues as the likes of De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, and Tropical Quest changed the game in hip hop as well too. Did it originally had intended to do it, but ended up doing it in honor of the late great Dove Trugoy of De La Soul. So with that, native tongue changed the game in hip hop. They will be the predecessors for a next genre, or crew collectives of music that will change the game in music altogether. Though that is the Soul Squadron, and who were incorporated with the wholly underrated, highly popular but underrated subgenre of music that was neo soul. So we're about to get into this movie called The Music Moment that we don't talk about enough, and it's facts because they have their own unsung as well as not being as talked about most. It's still out right now, but not as big and popular as it was around the time around the late 90s, early to mid 2000s. So without further ado, we'll check out The Music Moment we don't talk about enough, which is the Soul Squadron. Let's get it.
In the late 90s, Questlove helped found a collective of musicians and artists, including D'Angelo, James Poyser, Jay Dilla, Erykah Badu, Bilal, and others like Q-Tip, Talib Kweli, and Pino Palladino. They were dubbed.
And the funny part about it, this is the second collective that Q2 was part of, as he's part in their tongues. So yes,
somewhat accidentally, the Soulquarians. And this collection of albums is some of the best music ever recorded, and it's influenced so much music in completely different genres since. Today, I'm talking all about the Soulquarians, D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, Common, Jay Dilla, The Roots, etc. Diving into some of the specifics of their recording process, some of the albums, their influence since, and how all throughout Questlove knew what he had to do to make it big. Build a music scene. The Roots are kind of an anomaly. They're a hip-hop band. Hip-hop started as a DJ and MC, but the Roots took this structure and expanded it. What if instead of the two-person setup, you expanded what the DJ was doing? What if you had a live band underneath the MC? The Roots were founded by Tariq Trotter, aka Black Thought, as the MC, and Amir Thompson, aka Questlove, on drums. There have been many members of the Roots since, and they keep a large band, but for their first few albums, they were kind of hip-hop outcasts. Sorry, I need to pick a different word. Andre 3000 and Big Boy aren't in this story. The point is, hip-hop was one thing, and then there was the Roots. Let's take a listen to one of their early songs to see what I mean.
Yep.
It's got a good groove. It's kind of jazzy. It almost sounds like a Tribe Called Quest, but with a live band underneath. Yep. Now, you and I may love this, but contrast that with one of the top hip-hop hits in 1995.
That's the only thing. They was doing it good. They doing it big early, but it was all crowd about by the likes of Biggie and
very
West
different.
Coast and gangsta rap.
The Roots had critical acclaim from these first albums, but they didn't have the same commercial success as some of the other hip-hop artists from the day. And then on August 3rd, 1995, things changed. On the same day, we have the climax of one story and the beginning of another.
Oh, the social world, of course.
1995 was the height of the East Coast-West Coast beef. It was Diddy and his whole Bad Boy Records crew representing the East Coast, and Snoop Dogg, Suge Knight, and Death Row Records representing the West Coast. Things had been tense for some time, and at the height of the beef, they all decided to get in one room together for the 1995 Source Awards. The night went about how you'd expect. Suge Knight got on the mic, mocking Diddy, inviting other artists to come to Death Row. Diddy said, "I live in the East, and I'm gonna die in the East." When Outkast won Best New Artist, everybody booed, and Andre 3000 said, "The South's got something to say." I guess he is in this story. After Dr. Dre won Producer of the Year and people booed, Snoop Dogg ranted, "The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg." And at that moment, Questlove got up from his seat and fled the theater, worried for what would happen next. As he was on his way out the door, someone passed a cassette tape into his hand. I imagine this moment as like a Renaissance painting. Wow. On stage, you've got Dr. Dre and an angry pre-Martha Stewart Snoop Dogg. In front is an angry Diddy, Fonzworth Bentley next to him. I know the timeline doesn't make sense, it's fine. Further back, you've got Andre 3000 in the full Hey Ya outfit, and headed out the door is Questlove and some mysterious cloaked individual handing him a cassette tape. And if we zoom in and enhance on this Renaissance painting, we can faintly make out what the tape says. D'Angelo. I actually tried to make a Renaissance painting out of this by pasting that whole phrase into one of those AI art generators, and it didn't really work.
Lord.
This is the climax of one story and the beginning of another. See, the Roots had been going it alone all this time. They didn't have any other acts that they were associated with. They weren't part of the East Coast, the West Coast, or the South. They were just the Roots. And as we're about to see, having your own music scene is crucial. What Questlove had begun to realize at this point is that there are advantages to being associated with other groups. In fact, it's pretty much impossible to make it big as an artist by yourself. Think about it. Michael Jackson came out of the Jackson 5, Sting came out of the Police, Phil Collins out of Genesis, Justin Timberlake from NSYNC, Beyonce out of Destiny's Child, Harry Styles from One Direction, Lauryn Hill out of the Fugees, Ice Cube out of NWA, Dr. Dre as well. It doesn't even have to be as direct as that. Prince built a whole Minneapolis scene around him with artists like Sheila E. and The Time. And Pharrell has NERD and the Neptunes.
This is an idea Quest has talked about on multiple occasions, including during his 2021 interview with Talib Kweli.
The only artists that don't have other people associated with them are one-hit wonders. For example, you a big fan of Tag Team? No?
Yep.
How about this?
Hirsch's on there.
And Questlove was not trying to be Steve Gibson, one of the guys from Tag Team.
Yep.
When Questlove was handed the D'Angelo tape, he didn't think much of it. He had previously heard D'Angelo and kind of wrote him off as smooth R&B.
And not to mention, D'Angelo was like kind of Alzo, producer and writer for too. You know the song off the Jason Lyrics album, You Will Know, with a group of R&B singer. He was like, he had a hand in that as well too. I don't know he's like a producer or writer of it at the time, but yeah.
He even turned down a chance to record with him in order to go on a date. That session was canceled because not only did Quest back out, but the bass player backed out too when he found out the title of the song. That bass player was Ron Carter, and the song, the cassette tape that Quest had been handed at the 1995 Source Awards was D'Angelo's 1995 album, Brown Sugar. After listening to it, he immediately knew there was something special about D'Angelo. Questlove said he realized D'Angelo was singing over music that A Tribe Called Quest could make. A Tribe Called Quest had a big influence on the Roots. That's even where Questlove gets his moniker.
Nice.
So D'Angelo's Tribe influence was a no-brainer for Questlove. He found another music act that he wanted to be.
See how I like the Native Tongue and this is in the Soulquarian and the Twine a little bit, not just because two tips on both, but still
associated with. The mysterious person who handed Quest the tape, it turns out, was not D'Angelo. It wasn't a manager or a producer or, my personal theory, a time traveler from the future sent back in time in order to start the Soulquarians. No, it was just a random street team person who was probably handing them out to everybody. So, knowing the power of the group and knowing where he wanted to go, Questlove focused on what he had to do next. Win over D'Angelo and convince him that they should work together. In April of 1996, the Roots were playing a show at the House of Blues in Los Angeles. Questlove and D'Angelo had never met, but Quest was now on a mission to win them over. Questlove was an early fan of producer Jay Dilla, aka JD, born James Yancey, especially for his unique time feel. The first time he heard a Jay Dilla beat, he was floored. This was after a Roots show when he heard the Far Side play this song.
Oh yeah.
Notice the drums just feel looser, that kick. Almost drunk sounding. Now, Jay Dilla himself is gonna have to be a whole other video. But D'Angelo had started to experiment with this looser sounding drum feel on Brown.
I think he actually had a video. I think he has a J Dilla video too. I'm gonna check out when I get a chance.
Sugar. So that night at the House of Blues in 1996, Questlove spots D'Angelo. He's up in the balcony, really just a silhouette. For the sake of the story, let's make it smoky too. The Roots start the show, and Questlove is watching that smoky silhouette. But D'Angelo doesn't move. Next song, same thing. Remember, these two haven't met, and Questlove bailed on his recording session. As the Roots are playing, Questlove realizes what he has to do. He has to send D'Angelo a message. Now, Questlove had begun to experiment with the Dilla-style drumming, but that way of playing is so different and was so new, he hadn't tried it on the Roots yet. And he hadn't found any musicians who could keep it together when he played that way. But this was his chance, and he had to take it.
All of a sudden, Questlove starts playing an obscure Prince beat, also slipping into that loose, drunken Jay Dilla style.
And slowly, the silhouette starts bobbing his head. It keeps going, and Questlove's thinking, yeah, I got you now. History is made. This is the beginning of Questlove's signature style of playing, and the beginning of his relationship with D'Angelo. Meanwhile, though, the rest of the Roots are falling apart. They're trying desperately to keep it together, but they're looking at Questlove like he's crazy. But Quest has his eyes on that balcony, on that smoky silhouette. And standing right next to him is Erykah Badu. Can we do a Renaissance painting of this one too? Like, maybe it'll be better. Nope. Not better. Pretty unclear what's happening here. Pretty much just a mishmash. Questlove had solidified a partner. D'Angelo asked him to play on his next album. And a few weeks later, they would enter Electric Lady Studios in New York for what would turn out to be their musical, and sometimes literal, home for the next 5 or 6 years. Electric Lady Studios was built by Jimi Hendrix, and though he only got to spend 10 weeks recording there before his death in 1970, it became a favorite studio for artists like Stevie Wonder and David Bowie. But not in 1996. It hadn't been busy there for a while. They said they literally had to blow dust off the equipment.
Damn.
That wasn't necessarily a bad thing to D'Angelo. He was hoping to channel some of the magic from his favorite records. This meant that D'Angelo was playing the exact keyboard that Stevie Wonder played on Talking Book, and Questlove had to learn how to play softer on the vintage equipment. During the day, they'd go to record stores and spend thousands of dollars on records. They'd listen to them over and over, studying what made them so good and what made them timeless. Then they'd jam for hours, recreating the songs they'd just been listening to and messing around with the time and feel of them. At night, they'd watch Soul Train episodes or old bootleg videos of Prince. Questlove and D'Angelo quickly turned Electric Lady into essentially their own college. They're holed up in an old dusty recording studio, studying old records, jamming on stuff, experimenting, and even sleeping in the studio. The original plan was just to record D'Angelo's next album, Voodoo. But Questlove was also trying to simultaneously record The Roots' next album, Things Fall Apart. And he was commuting back and forth between Philadelphia and New York. So to make it easier, Quest moved the Roots sessions to Electric Lady also. James Poyser was called to be the in-house composer and keyboard player. This was before he would eventually join the Roots himself. Jay Dilla was called in for his incredibly innovative production. Again, Dilla's gonna have to be a whole other video. But this core group of 4 members, Questlove, D'Angelo, James Poyser, and Jay Dilla, were the start of what we would now call the Soulquarians. No, a Soulquarian is not a mythical aquarium in the underworld where lost souls go when they die. That's a Soulquarium. Soulquarian is the term that these 4 original members chose because they realized they all share the same zodiac sign, they all loved soul music, and they had a shared love of strange chords, offbeat rhythms, and other underground music elements. It was just a funny term that they threw around and never meant it to be their official name. But then the group added a few more members. Now, it can get a little murky on who is officially considered a Soulquarian, but we're talking Erykah Badu, Common, Bilal, Q-Tip, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, trumpet player Roy Hargrove, and bassist Pino Palladino. Over the next 5 or 6 years, the Soulquarians became this giant melting pot of musical experimentation. D'Angelo would be recording in Studio A, while Common's in Studio B, with Bilal or Mos Def in Studio C. At times, they were simultaneously working on D'Angelo's Voodoo, Common's Like Water for Chocolate, and Erykah Badu's Mama's Gun, all at the same time, all at Electric Lady. This was an incredibly creative environment, fusing old ideas from soul records they loved with new ones like Jay Dilla's unique time feel. A classic Jay Dilla beat isn't just sloppy. He used an Akai MPC in a unique way, quantizing each part of the drum kit differently so they don't necessarily land together. This is not something a human can do by default. Questlove had to train himself to do this. Let's listen to the D'Angelo song The Root off of Voodoo. So Questlove is rushing the snare, classic Dilla technique. And for Dilla, playing on a drum machine, once you program it, you're done. But Questlove has to fight a lifetime of playing the drums in order for that snare to land early. At times, D'Angelo would lay his keyboard playing far back behind the beat and ask bassist Pino Palladino to do the same. By default, Questlove would follow them, but if there's no beat to be behind, then how could you play behind the beat? Philosophy. Questlove had to take his headphones off and just play, so he couldn't even hear D'Angelo and Pino, eventually getting good enough to put his headphones back on. And this is just D'Angelo in Studio A. At the same time, we've got Erykah Badu recording Mama's Gun, which also features Questlove and Pino, James Poyser, Russ Elevato, the engineer on Voodoo, Roy Hargrove, who's also on Voodoo. Let's take a listen to Didn't You Know by Erykah. That's so good, I might just cancel the rest of the video and just play that. Contrast this with the big R&B of the day. Artists like Mary J. Blige. The commercially popular R&B was essentially a hip-hop beat with singing over it. But D'Angelo and Erica wanted to dissect the elements behind those beats, using a combination of new programming techniques, as well as traditional instruments and good musicianship. Dan Charnas, the author of Dilla Time, describes neo-soul as a revival of soul's analog heyday by its digital children. This book, by the way, is incredible and I highly recommend it. The environment during these years at Electric Lady was incredibly creative, but also competitive. Songs would be passed back and forth between studios and artists. The most famous example is that D'Angelo's Chicken Grease was originally supposed to go to Common, until D'Angelo insisted on having it and offered the song Ghetto Heaven Part 2 in exchange. There was good competition too. Dilla was fond of doing beat Olympics. You would basically be tasked with making a beat from a record that someone else chose for you. Questlove picked a song for Dilla, Give It To Me Baby by Rick James, because he considered it unsamplable. In his mind, it was too polished and it doesn't have a drum break. By the way, for more on the importance of drum breaks and how James Brown essentially incepted his way into hip-hop, watch this video. Well, here's the original.
We'll check that.
Dilla took this, slowed it down and chopped it up, then pitched it down, and turned this unsamplable song into the Common song, Doing It.
Keep on.
Wow.
Keep on. Keep on.
And then there's Questlove's own original group, The Roots. The guitar on this one feels like it could be a D'Angelo song.
Yeah.
Touch this elephant dynamite. Yo, touch this elephant dynamite. Yo, touch this elephant dynamite. Check it out.
These 4 albums, D'Angelo's Voodoo, Erykah Badu's Mama's Gun, Common's Like Water for Chocolate, and Things Fall Apart by The Roots, are at the core of the Soulquarian sound. There are other adjacent albums that could be considered Soulquarian, like Bilal's Firstborn Second, Mos Def's Black on Both Sides, Talib's Quality, Slum Village, and Q-Tip's Amplified. D'Angelo's Voodoo was a massive success. It charted for 33 weeks on Billboard, peaking at #1, and has since become what I like to call the kind of blue of neo-soul. Erykah Badu's Mama's Gun gave her her first top 10 hit. Common's album Like Water for Chocolate was considered his best album to date and peaked at #16 on Billboard. And as far as the Roots go, Things Fall Apart was a breakthrough album. It was well received critically and peaked at #4 on Billboard. Rolling Stone lists Voodoo, Mama's Gun, and Things Fall Apart in the top 500 albums of all time. Sorry, Common. This stretch of 5 or 6 years at Electric Lady Studios is an incredible thing to imagine. So much creativity flowing through the studio. I picture D'Angelo over here on keys, Pino's on bass over there, Questlove's on drums back there, Erica's back in the booth, Common's peeking his head in, he's trying to take back Chicken Grease. Can we do the Renaissance painting for this one too?
No.
I mean, no, not really. That's not... Ugh. This AI is embarrassing. Questlove's plan had worked. He knew he needed to build a music scene in order to take the Roots and himself to the next level. But the Soulquarians became so much more than just a vehicle for his own success. They'd become a movement. But, like the Renaissance, all things eventually must come to an end.
Yeah.
They just didn't see this one coming. In September of 2000, there was a profile and photo spread in Vibe magazine formally introducing the Soulquarians. Some of their albums had been released at this point and were doing incredibly well. The movement was starting to get recognized. This profile for Vibe was originally supposed to be Questlove by himself, but he insisted on bringing in more people. Questlove absolutely is the common thread running through all of this. He knew he needed a community of artists around him and the Roots for the next evolutionary step. And at the height of everything, Questlove was working with 17 different artists. But this is also clearly a collective. There are a lot of people involved, and this is all bigger than just Questlove himself. So they brought in more people and took this infamous photo for the article. The journalist overheard the term Soulquarian and asked what it meant. Questlove explained the story of how he, D'Angelo, James Poyser, and Jay Dilla all felt connected and shared the same zodiac sign. However, when the article came out, Questlove's collaborators didn't like the way the article made it sound like they worked for him. And to top it off, the entire group was introduced as the Soulquarians. This photo is its own sort of Renaissance painting. It's such an insane group of musicians at an incredible time, but like the other paintings we've talked about, this one had its own beginning, the beginning of the end. Eventually, the group started to drift, working on other projects with different people, different studios, and the Soulquarians were essentially dissolved. The final nail in the coffin was during the filming of Dave Chappelle's Block Party in 2004. This was a movie that was exactly what it sounds like. Dave Chappelle throws a block party, reuniting the Roots, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Erykah Badu, Common, Jill Scott, and more, including a young Kanye West. Questlove recalled, "I knew it was the last time the Electric Eight were going to be together. Mos, Common, Bilal, D'Angelo, Erykah, James Poyser, Jay Dilla, and me. I knew it was our funeral. I knew that the next Renaissance wasn't going to be Roots-centric. Seeing Kanye with the marching band from that movie, I knew I wasn't going to be central to the next movement anymore. Right. He was going to be the leader, and I would have to be fine with it." Questlove knew that in order to take the Roots and himself to the next level, he needed a group of like-minded musicians and artists. And the Soulquarians ended up being so much more than that. There is so much more to be said about the Soulquarians, their individual albums and far-reaching influences, and where these albums fit in the larger discographies. So, keep an eye out for future videos. For now, I'll leave you with something special. An art gallery of AI-generated Soulquarian Renaissance paintings. For more music history videos, check out the rest of my channel. And hey, drop a comment, say what's up.
Alright, cool. So anyway, there you have it. Though we went from the Native Tongue to the ones that was the successor of the Native Tongue, the Soulquarians and everything. So it was a good video to check out those too. So yeah, I definitely might check out some more videos from Digging Crazy School in the future though. Shout out to my man's right here. So other than that, if you like my reaction, like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's your boy T-Bear signing off. One love.